Boom. We're back on. So you were saying that Danny brought all of you together. It was this sense of belonging, this tribe. But obviously, it's not for everybody. And you had some people.
The others can learn, right? I'm sorry, am I cutting you off, or were you teeing me up there?
No, I was teeing you. It was.
Yeah. So some people will benefit from that, and sometimes I almost feel guilty that I don't give as much, like in terms of like back in the old days of sharing on online forums and writing articles. I wrote articles at Search Engine Watch, and then I wrote them some other places. But frankly, it's partially because I just ran out, and you and I talked about that, right? Where it's just hard to keep writing. But I think that there's other ways to give back now. And to me, that's those conferences, right? And people pay for that, and people get value from it. I don't get paid to speak at conferences. And so therefore, that's sort of my giving back in a way, right? And then participating in online stuff too is sort of where I am now. But that's 20 years or 15 years later, you could say 16 years later, since I entered sort of the public SEO.
20 years. Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, it really is.
2020, yeah. Okay, let me tell me the truth, please, Chris. Because I quit free public speaking a while ago because I live in the middle of the mountain, and it would take me 2.5 hours to go to the airport, and then and we didn't have this type of tools back then to share and to put your voice out there. Even 5 years ago, doing a webinar was very painful. But how much is just getting back with the crew, having a good time after the event or before, the night before, and how much is about the talk itself and sharing knowledge? How much did that
Well, there's an old saying that you don't really learn anything until after midnight, right? and Matt Cutts, obviously everyone knows who he is. And we laughed because he was one of the guys who would come around, and I had his email, and I would call it my Matt Cutts silver bullet because I could email him like once or twice a year. I never did it more because he would always answer me, and he would answer me directly about a problem, right? But he would hang around.
Is that email that starts with
his Diet Coke, and then at midnight is when he would start learning all the shit too,
The email you have, is it the one that starts with silicone something?
No, it's literally matt@google.com.
Oh, okay. So it's his private Gmail account. Okay. That's also one of my big point about those huge SEO events. Even with people, especially for people who attend these events, couple of days, transportation. While you are doing that, you are not doing something else. When today I'm more into the local SEO event, even bringing big international, big speakers, but staying local one day, not so people can come by car, and because it's about networking more than the talks. And so yeah, that's kind of my move right now in the mindset of SEO events. But the big, the Brighton SEO in England, or all the ones you have in the USA, it's still like the big. It's like Mecca, once a year, everybody gathers.
More than once, right? And I'm in the woods a little bit myself. I mean, granted, I'm 2 hours from New York, Boston, or Montreal, so it's not that like I'm that far. But
hi, Chris lives where I went to college.
That's correct.
Yeah, upstate New York.
Okay. Shoot, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So the point is that I like to see my friends, right? And these are people that I've been speaking at conferences with for 15 years now.
True.
And And the added layer is that for 6 years I'm on my own business, so I don't walk in and say, "Hey, Julie, hey, Bob, hey, whatever," every day, right? It's like, to me, it's sanity a little bit, right? And so with this whole COVID thing, it's been useful. We've had a couple, the Corona Pub and stuff like that, where it's been, nice to stay in touch with some people, but it's frankly getting freaking frustrating because, I like to have some people time, and these are long time friends, and sometimes, we might not even talk business the whole time. Some of my friends that I hang out with a long amount of time at the event, but that's because that's part of, the ability to get out there, and you're among people that have the same problems as you, like especially other fellow consultants or business owners. It's easy to bitch about something like a Google rep calling your client or something like that, right? To someone over a steak and 3 shots of tequila, and that's just how it is, I think.
Uh, what we started doing last week was the 1:30 to 2. Just a quick, but the problem is if I'm not doing it, they are not doing it. I have to launch it. I have to initiate the move, like the poker, right? And so sometimes it's just an idea, but it's about doing. And what we do is, it will start to be a habit, hopefully every day, where between for half an hour we just say hi and hey, what's up? And if some carry on the conversation, and if you have to go back to work, you go back to work, do whatever you want. But you are right. The Corona Pub was a delight. I suck at quizzes. You guys are too good. So it was, I stopped attending the quizzes and I started coming in later on. But you're right about the old school, because it comes from the early days of this bond and this virtual world is incapable of fixing or replacing the need to see each other and have a beer or more.
Another old school guy, Lauren Baker, he founded Search Engine Journal, which he ultimately sold to someone else, but he was always a good friend of mine. Because we shared a bond of, he was from Baltimore area and I was kind of from the DC area, and he's a Ravens fan and my son's a Ravens fan, so we've kept up friendship. But recently, his father passed, and this is something where it's a 5.5 hour drive. He had to fly across the country. But because of what's going on right now, I couldn't even go down and attend, his father's funeral, which is a real bummer, right? But those are the kinds of things that we can stand together as an industry and do with longtime friends in the industry. And it's not something, that you would just go to anyone's funeral or something like that. But it hits harder when you have to miss something like that, because of the regulations and the risks obviously associated with it.
Yeah, of course. But the spirit, the mindset of a SEO, especially one who started in 2000 and who is still standing strong in 2020, a virus won't stop you. A nuclear war won't stop you, okay? You will figure it out, always. That's what makes... What I try to deconstruct and to show to people listening to us is how do you acquire this mindset that makes you invincible, that makes you adapt? Because in our industry, if you don't adapt, you die, you disappear, you're gone, and it's a split of a second. If you
acquire it by moving something from number 10 page for auto insurance to number 1 or 2, right? You keep doing that, you get pretty confident, right?
Of course, and you have to. It's a thin line, and we were talking off before about the way I communicate in French with my community, where it's a lot more punchy, a lot borderline trolling, and very different style. Because also I'm aware I need I know how to adapt to different cultures. And if you do an international SEO, the most difficult is adapting to this culture. So the way I communicate on SEO Conspiracy is different than the way I communicate in French. It's part of the job. It's how the word instinct is it's engraved into your DNA. So it's not the proper word. I don't even know what word to use. Maybe reflect. No, I don't know. But it's just it's a mindset. You know, it's a mindset. You figure it out. There's always a way. There's always a way. You need to adapt. If you started in 2000 and first, if you survived Florida, you're already pretty good. If you survived Panda, Penguin, and all the ones in between and after, coming from the dark side of the force, I mean, the penalty, blacklisting, you really think that I care about a penalty, or even if you blacklist my domain, it's just part of the deal. If you are aggressive, if you play with fire, don't complain if you get burned, right?
It's funny you say that, because to me that was one of the fallback points to standards. Is that we create an approved and known list of tactics and a degree of risk, right? And so if people that want to write down everything from, injecting code to getting a link from the Pope because you're so awesome, and saying what it is and why it's valuable and what the risk is, right? And to me, just that alone would be useful for marketers that are very smart people, but just don't understand search and don't understand. They want to get ahead. They want their business to succeed. And they've got these guys that are pitching them different methodologies or whatever. And they don't know, are these guys even saying any of these things, and so forth. So to me, I think that would be a great first step towards a standards type of thing, is to just list out what the tactics are in a neutral manner and say, this is risky as fuck. You might lose your site, or this is not risky. If you can do this, you're going to win Marketer of the Year award, right? Those are, to me, if we could create a list like that, that's very useful for the industry, but not only for the industry, for other marketers that still look at us as we're smoke and mirrors, right? And rightfully so, because a lot of fucking bullshit artists exist in SEO, right? So that's...
Let me play devil's advocate here, because one single person changed my mind on the whole thing. And it's recorded. It's not published yet, but we did a podcast with Judith Lewis about the standards, and we spoke about SEMPO, but very briefly, because she doesn't have your experience in the matter. So we will do also Chris Boggs on standards podcast. But Christine Scheschinger has a point. And I separated with SEO Comp, or SEO Comp is the big SEO organization, association, and big SEO event in France, because I was about building standards and all that. But Christine was like, you know what? At this point, I think it's better that we are invisible. And as a proof, or as a look, if you go to, I think it's page 177 of the report of the big tech hearing, the 451 page report that just came out from the Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google DOJ investigation, we don't exist. They talk about online search. They give they crawl the index, but they have no clue. DOJ investigated for 1 year Google. They don't even know what SEO is. So, you know what I mean? like I was 100% for 15 years all about we need, because there's so much bullshit, there's so much fakers, there's so many, we need to standardize everything. But Christine was like, dude, think about it. they don't know who we are. Did you really want Chris Boggs to go testify in front of Congress? My point now is, yeah, guys, we need to standardize. We need to do all this. But for me, myself, and I, at this point in my career, it's perfect that we are undercover and nobody knows who we are. And within the marketing industry, and even within the digital marketing industry, we scare them. They're afraid of us. And that was very interesting. What do you think of that? This other side of the story, or the other side of the coin? This argument that, you know what I mean?
I think it's a good point. It's the same risk that you take if you really blow the lid off on some of the, I would say, suspicious spend that happens in Google Ads, right? If for display advertising in particular. You can either keep your mouth shut about it and do the best that you can within the tools to prevent the wastage, or you could be testifying in front of Congress. Frankly, it is that big of a swing, because we all know, like you said, we all know the ins and outs. And on the SEO side, I think that if you gave us a true shake and you compare it to some of the other scamming tactics that are out there, right? SEO is not a bad thing, even if you do black hat SEO. Granted, some of the contact emails for getting links are a little bit immoral, but there's really, it's not that bad when you think about it. So I also understand and agree with Christine's concept of that. Don't make too much noise or somebody's going to notice us. But the flip to that is that we are now, and this is another one of these 20 years in the business kind of thing, where you can see when you look back, and especially at the biggest tables, right? Like when I was working 10 years ago in an agency in Cleveland, and we worked for a very large insurance company, we would get to meet once a year, maybe, with a vice president. And that vice president still reported up to however many other people, right? But we were, in our mind, if we were charging six figures a year for SEO, this was a pretty legitimate enterprise, and we are important. But as far as now that I look back, all that shit we did was summarized like in one short bullet that made it up to the CEO. Probably made it to the CMO, and then maybe made it to the CMO, right? When we moved on to the first page, right?
Sure.
But then when they realized that was a six-figure-a-day income for them to be on the first page for a term like auto insurance, then people started to realize up the chain. So what I'm saying is that now, a lot of that's been going on up the chain across the board, right? And there's a lot more CEOs that are playing golf with Congress people, or having dinner with a congresswoman, or playing golf with her, or whatever, right? I think there's more of a risk of that happening anyway. So you could say that it would be a good proactive step for us to look like we had a fucking act together and had some standards, or at least like a list of risk factors, right? So that's what I would argue back, is that it's coming. You can see it coming, right? There's more and more CEOs out there that know what SEO is than they did even just 2 years ago.
It's been 20 years. So it's inevitable. And now SEO as a skill is an endless rabbit hole. If you look up on LinkedIn and try to dig into LinkedIn around the skill SEO, you won't get to the bottom. Yeah. It's endless. You know
that Seppo was involved. There's a company that does the job classifications so it's something that I have to talk about with Christine probably, but there actually was an attempt to classify all of our job roles, and they reached out to us about 10 years ago and said, thanks for the input. We gave them a bunch of stuff. We'll get back to you in about 5 or 6 years. And they literally got back to us in about
Wow.
5 or 6 years, and they said, "Oh, we've got these jobs together now." And that was about 3 years ago. And then we had some stuff back and forth, but frankly, I just don't think it's made it into the system yet. But there is; it's very close. Those job classifications have been developed with the help of Sempo and some other groups that they also leveraged. I can't think of the name of the company, but I can look it up right now. But the point is that is on the way, but it just takes that long. And they were right. They said they'd be 5 or 6 years, and 5 or 6 years later, they
That's
came
crazy.
back to us like clockwork. Yeah.
Wow. To go. Okay, we will most definitely do this podcast about the standards and go back more into details about Sampo. But let's go back into the original crew and all those events. Side note, we totally forgot because you were talking about the Google Dance, the event. Just a side note for people who got mixed up. There's the Google Dance, the refresh of the PageRank. that was an algorithm. Okay, there was a PageRank refresh, but they used the. So tell us more about the parties. Because
so you got 1 year. I got invited by Matt and to be part of the special group that went in before the Google Dance, and we actually talked about what would ultimately become the canonical tag. It was very cool. And at that point, I was in a lot of e-commerce, and one of my big pushes was make sure that it's a 301 also, because we need all the juice and everything. But we literally sat around a room, a huge table with a bunch of us SEOs. Matt Cutts asking us questions about, because they realized that they had these problems with duplicate URLs. And what came out of that meeting and around us, sitting around the room, was literally like 24 Google engineers and stuff like that. It was very cool. The even cooler part about it, well, if you're a geek, is that after all this happened, we all played Werewolf, which is a game where you have to sit down and, it's very funny, very geeky. And then the Google Dance was after that. So I think that was like 2007, that one that I went. So there was these other little meetings and that was the only one I ever got invited to. But typically, like a lot of the black hats would get invited to all of them and stuff like that. Like, some of the UK guys that were over there at that point. That spacing names right now, but Jim Banks, people like that, right? That were kind of early in the industry, were also involved in these kinds of meetings. So it was very cool because there was sort of an extra layer to this. But the party itself was everyone comes, and then they have a band there. I mean, they usually probably spend $10, $20, $30 on $1,000 on the band because it was some big band. They had beer flowing everywhere, different types of food everywhere. You could play volleyball. You could smoke over by the bathrooms. You could do whatever you wanted to do, basically.
And you guys were not only smoking cigarettes, from what I heard.
No. This is,
and what other crazy SEO event in Germany? There's the Oktoberfest. In Spain, there's something. In France, we're out on a boat. What do you guys over the USA?
Oh, Darren and Brandy Babin, they were pretty instrumental, especially in the mid-2000s into the early 2010s, of organizing a lot of the parties that were around these events. And they called it the Search Bash. And they both had some background, or he did, in the porn industry and stuff like that. And he'd had a lot of big party background and stuff like that. So they did a very good job of creating what usually ended up being the biggest party of the event. And it was sort of sponsored by the conference, but, not really part of the conference. And they rent out some bar, and it was always just crazy fun, right? So that was probably the number one. But a lot of other times, this was an opportunity for the various sponsors of the event to have a party too. So they would get the happy hour that night. So pretty much every night of the conference, while this was, and there was a lot of money in it, right? In the 2000s, in the 2010, 2012, 2015. But then that's when they started doing in the early 2010s what I called the thought leadership purge, right? Where a lot of people in big industry, in big agencies that were basically conference speakers were moving, which means that their agency said, okay, you're either going to become chargeable or you're out of here, right? And that happened kind of across the board. And that shifted things also a little bit, I think, in the party side of things, where all these companies ranging from Super Pages or Yahoo or SEM Rush, they're still spending, right? But a lot of them stopped spending on these events into the early 2010s, it seemed, because people started to, it'd been 6 years, some of them were doing well, the industry was definitely growing, but I think people started to be like, whoa, wait a minute, we're getting a little too heavy on the parties here, too much money for, we're basically marketing to other like agencies and other, I think that's where, frankly, there's a big opportunity still. It's like, we've grown now, we've done 20 years, and we've had a lot of our own conferences, and that's great for people that want to learn our own stuff. But if you really want to go try business and be different, you got to go to another conference now. It's time, right, to get out from just search conferences and really, if you want to be effective in spreading the gospel, you got to get out to different conferences, I think, now.
Oh, for sure. Even from a business standpoint, if you're SEO and you want to, well, if you go to SEO event, it's good to connect and meet a lot of very valuable people. But from a business standpoint, when I got business was most definitely those more like web events, more broad, not just digital marketing or SEO, but definitely more about web events in general. And then I would come out of there with signed contracts on a napkin kind of thing, and spreading, like you say, spreading the gospel outside of our little cave.
Marketing to marketers.
Marketing to marketers. It's very, very interesting how, to go back to the beginning of the discussion, when you said, I got educated about marketing and so on. I will even now add a layer to how when I started to do consulting, I got educated about consulting and the job of being a consultant. And there wasn't much because, you had those high class consultants, but that's not interesting. It was more about how do you give value and how to make people activate. Because especially as a consultant, you don't put your hands dirty into the code, and they have to do so. You have to find ways to push people to activate. So it's kind of complicated. But going back to this knowledge, back then we started from a blank page. When did you see this information overload come in? And especially, let me get into, I know the story, so we won't give names, but one person in particular who is kind of the meme in the industry of this bullshit SEO type of talks and courses and YouTube videos and stuff. But you did created some, I was going to say some evil people, some monsters who kind of hang out with you guys. And you're, hey, he's a cool kid. Yeah, you brought them in. And then
That's Neil Patel. I mean, in a nutshell, that guy literally was hanging out at the bar with us at SES when he was 17 or something. Like that. Oh, this kid's cool, and like we saw him a couple of years in a row. And the next thing I know, he's like, everyone hates him. It's like,
yeah. That's definitely what I was talking about, because I'm guilty also of putting people up, pushing them and giving them some credentials, and then in fact, well, they're full of it. And Neil Patel is a specific example where, because of family money, because you come in with tons of resources, you can achieve a lot in a very short time by not being original and stuff. But that most definitely is the top meme in the industry about this behavior. But the concept of being smart enough, the idea of being smart enough at that young age, at 17 years old, saying, hey, I'm going to get validation from those OGs, from the real guys. And then having the vision to, hey, I got money. I'm going to invest in a couple of cool startups. And then, overnight, I become one of those makers. I jump on top of the top 1% of that pyramid overnight. It's brilliant.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Exactly. So you do have to give credentials to the plan, to the genius way of playing everything in your favor from that early on. That's also a shift that I see from this younger generation, because they have teeth like that long, okay? They come in at 17 or at 20 with a business, a work ethic, a business mindset, and it's nuts. We didn't know what we were doing. Literally, like we were just playing, having fun. Even if you guys, because I know the European culture, and you do too, and you can compare with, especially in the US, where it's more about you do the work. Point number one, I do this. Point number two, I do this. This is the checklist, okay? The to-do, and you have to do your work, and you repeat, and this is how it's done. And that's what I learned by living over there and studying over there. Well, in France, and the more south you go, the more it's more freestyle, and yeah, it'll work. It will work. We'll figure it out. Tomorrow.
It's funny, earlier you said, and I had to bring up my Belgianness, because my mother's Belgian. I was born in Belgium, so that's why I speak French pretty well. And I also lived in Bordeaux pendant mon enfance. But it's funny, as a Belgian, earlier on, you were saying something about how in France, blah, blah, this, and I said, it's yes, because your national symbol is the rooster, right? And this is a very proud bird that stands for it and takes charge, right? So
but the rooster is the only animal who can still sing while having its feet in the shit. Okay?
That's a good one. I like that.
It's not mine. It's from Coluche, a famous comic. But
that's a good one.
Truth is, you are in the shit, but you can still sing. That's the rooster. Well, there's so much because we didn't give any dates, and in my mind I could sequence the whole thing, but at the end of the day, what happened is, and what's very interesting in this conversation, and if you had one thing to take from what Chris brought us, is a couple of people can change things. Okay, it's not like, first of all, people think you were lucky because you came in out of nowhere at the right time, at the right place, with the right people, and there was nobody before. But still, it's still possible today. It's still possible to start, even within SEO. There's so much new stuff. There's so much room to grow without stepping on other people's shit. That's the problem with Neil Patel and others, is you don't have to build your thing by stepping on other people's, right? You can build your own thing. That's what I'm doing here, okay? Yeah, sure, I fight against Google propaganda and stuff, but I don't, who am I? Like, is Google really, are there any really big consequences for Google about my little podcast? No. So I'm not doing any damage over there. And even think about it, like 20 years looking back at today, the little breadcrumbs, the little thing, it was just fun, having beers, having ideas or sample, or even if it failed, it's never too late. And maybe it was too early, okay? It was not the right time. Maybe it's the right time now to start something like it. Maybe, but it's tremendous. It's genius looking back at everything that was built around a few guys hanging out, and to go back to this invisible SEO industry. The money, huge. The budgets, the billions or the millions. Yeah, billions, not millions, billions.
Bruce Clay started charging 6 figures for SEO before everyone thought it was even possible, and he kept doing it, you know.
Yeah, I was subcontracting for an agency who got the first 6-figure budget ever in France, and that was 2003 or 2004. A travel website. Can you imagine that back then you were just one guy with a computer and an internet connection, not knowing anything? There was nothing. It didn't exist. And now it's just a $1 billion industry, which with I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of individuals. Pretty crazy, right? When you look back, it was just a small crew, and now it's humongous with big publicly traded agencies and stuff. It makes my head dizzy a little bit.
But with this, I mean, they've swallowed up a lot of them.
But now, to end up, because it's been, well, there was a cut, so I don't even know how long was the first part. But we have to end it somewhere. But next time, we will do a series with you. And next time, why not the discussion about tempo and standards? That would be a good talk. But make us dream to end up this conversation about the crazy days of SEOs. If you had to sum up, if there's one thing that comes up to your mind, the very cool meetings with Google. And I heard that Bing is starting to do that now. Google is not doing it anymore. Google is not asking Chris Boggs to come to Mountain View with 24 engineers. That doesn't happen anymore. But I heard Bing is starting to talk to SEOs. That's an interesting move. What do you think about that one?
Well, it's funny because unfortunately, I have a call in a few minutes with a client. But Fabrice Canel from Bing is actually about to speak as the keynote for PubCon this morning, and I've enjoyed the content that he's presented before. I think Bing is a good opportunity. It's one of those things, like you said, that you want to do it, but you don't have time. Like there's so many times that I want to get into the Bing Webmaster Tools and start to experience the differences from it. But right now, my time of day is just crazy, right? So it's like one of those things, like my own sites that I'm going to be building tomorrow. Demain, ça arrive demain. I do want to get into it, and I think that Bing is finally made. I mean, we've laughed at them so long, right? Microsoft Search, live, and then it was pretty bad for a while. But I think that they've really turned the corner in the last 5 years or so compared to what they were. And I still am a little bit dubious about their footprint and their ability to, how much different can you do for Bing than you can if you're working for Google optimization, and does it worth it? I think, yes, obviously you can find some sites out there, and yes, maybe there's a little bit of correlation with B2B, a little bit more popular, who knows, right? Or education, that it might be more important in Bing. But I personally, we all don't have a lot of time, right? So I'm sorry to say, Bing, but you're still sort of a bit of a background thing for me, because I do feel that what I've cultivated over time in the basics of SEO is good stuff that's going to translate over to Bing anyway. But I do want to. I want to spend some more time with Bing. It's for sure.
Yeah, no, it was more about the search engine to SEO relationship level.
Good point. Yeah.
But
speaking right now, there you go.
You're right about the fact that SEOs need to focus. I always say a platform has about 1.5 to 2 years of life before we come in. So I was mentioning TikTok. I don't remember if it was off or on, but TikTok ads exist. I'm putting a little bit of money in it, testing it out. It's been a little bit over 2 years. So yeah, why not? I don't know.
Brew_dads is my TikTok. It's because my daughter does it, so I have to occasionally appear in dances with her.
And mindset. 80%, 90% of what makes someone like Chris Boggs, who is the mindset. Is what's it's not something about how many books or whatever, even if you say education is important. So we will explore the mindset of Chris Boggs. I will deconstruct his brain for you guys. That's my mission in life. We will extract everything, Matrix style, okay? Swallow it out and put it out there. Thank you, Chris, very much.
Merci beaucoup, Laurent.
And until next time, everybody, thank you for watching and stay safe.
I'll talk to you soon, mon ami.